A big welcome to the Nick Elston Show, hosted by inspirational speaker and transformational speaking coach Nick Elston. This show brings you the people who inspire, motivate, educate, and engage in all walks of life, sharing their insights and experiences honestly, unfiltered, and off script. So, without further ado, let's get stuck into today's show.
Hey everyone, a big welcome back to the Nick Elston Show. It's season 4, episode 16. And what a guest to bring us back into flow. We have the amazing meditation guru, Judy Smith. Big round of applause for Judy. Woo!
Thank you.
How are you? Thank you, Judy. Thanks for being on the show.
Well, thank you for asking me. I feel like this is a great opportunity to talk with you. And even on my side, find more about your inspiring story, because I know from what you've told me, what I've listened to, it's very compelling. And I think it helps a lot of people. Even the conversations we've had, extremely helpful for me.
Absolutely. I've loved our conversation so far. And you're very thoughtful as well, always kind of asking after me and stuff, which is really cool. So it's very, very kind. Anyway, I digress. So, okay, where should we go with this? So you are a Canadian, not living in Canada. Where are you?
Well, now I'm in Spain. Yes, I grew up in, I'd say, middle of nowhere kind of Canada. And then, I always think about more cows than people, actually, where I grew up. And then I moved to the UK. I was there for 17 years. So, I say kind of extremes in that, from middle of nowhere. And then I gradually went to bigger cities before I lived in London for like 17 years. So, yeah.
And now you're in Spain.
And now I'm in Spain. Yes, for the past year and a half.
Is that a temperature choice?
Well, that was a universe choice.
I'm sure we'll dive into that. But before we go anywhere,
tell
us all who you are and what you do.
Yeah. Okay. So essentially, well, we kind of covered where I'm from. And I would say I had I still do a corporate background. So I've been in cybersecurity for 22 or more years, something like that, mid-senior kind of management roles. And more relation to what I do now, because I do that kind of a part-time basis. But in 2005, I went through a divorce, and I, if I'm honest, kind of was going, yay, freedom, let me travel the world and, find my path and all sorts of stuff. And kind of unbeknownst to me, my path was on that journey. And I was in Nepal, where I discovered meditation. And if someone would have told me, like, let's say 15 years before that, that I would be, even considering that path of meditation, I'd say like cuckoo banana stuff, right? And there I was. And for me, no less than life-changing. And it was the perfect time for me as well. But what I found is that, so in my case, different people come to meditation for different reasons. For me, it helped me be more grounded, because I was always high energy, but scattered energy. And even things like helping me sleep, a lot of those kind of things kind of fell away. So, that was my path into meditation. It was simply the right time, traveling the world. I say seeking something, but it wasn't. I find when you think you're seeking something, often what you think you're seeking isn't at the end of that road, if that makes sense.
It really does. Actually, it really does make sense to me.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah.
And in terms of now then, so you coach meditation.
Yes.
So what does your kind of typical client look like?
Okay, interesting. Well, that's the thing. So when I first started teaching, so in 2005, I started meditating. It was, I think, around 2010 when I started actually teaching meditation. And if I'm honest, it was like an internal battle, even doing that. I'm thinking, I'm not some guru. What am I thinking of doing teaching meditation? Crazy. Yeah. But it just was, when people talk about callings, again, I think, I used to think, whatever. But I get it now.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't stop. And so I was like compelled to teach, and it just would move through me. Yeah. And so I tried to attract what I call kind of more woo-woo kind of people. Hey, let's explore meditation. And what I found was that the people I was working with, so the busy professional people that could relate, I could relate to their story, they could relate to mine, and more in a kind of bite-sized rather than, and with, I say that Western mind in mind. So instead of going, okay, sit on the cushion and something will happen, is that what's driving me to sit in meditation? Let's keep that in mind. So it's like I was able to relate to that story and then give guidance based on that. So yeah, most of my clients are these busy professional people that are trying to do too much with, I say, limited resources sometimes, and seeking something deeper. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's not exactly a kind of natural leap from cybersecurity to meditation, is it? Yeah. When I say I've heard it all, I genuinely never heard it all. Like, genuinely, there's always kind of a googly that somebody will throw at you that you just never heard before. And you mentioned, woo-woos were mentioned probably on the last 4 to 5 last episodes, given the guests I've had on. And this is a woo-woo friendly zone in here for sure. But also the challenges, the barriers to things like meditation. I think you mentioned that kind of Western mindset kind of thing. That I think that when I've, speaking from my own experience, kind of I'm very mindful of kind of not going back into kind of burnout or anywhere near the kind of breakdown phase again. And along the way, I've tried different things. Meditation was one of the things I tried. And I was talking about this to a guest we had on recently, Sean, who a great guy, founder of the 555 Club. And he was talking about kind of meditation and how actually I find it quite difficult to achieve because my brain's going like this all the time. And when it comes to looking at things like that, when you tell me to think of nothing, I think of everything. It's like when I try to sleep.
Yes.
It doesn't work. So,
yes.
But I imagine I'm not alone in people that come to you that actually do have a desire to try and quieten their mind and to increase their well-being, but absolutely their mind races at 150 miles an hour. What would you do with people like that?
Yeah.
And shooting them in the head is not a good answer, by the way, because I'm hosting this.
No. But this is the thing, is people get confused because when we sit in stillness, we're not used to it. And therefore, the mind will then, start up on us. And we're expecting it to, look, I'm supposed to be having a vacant mind, but that's not going to happen. And actually, I would say you're on the verge of something. Yeah. So you have to get a bit uncomfortable to get past that. So I remember I was doing a talk once, and I was not to offend anybody, but it was to an American audience who are quite vocal. Yeah. So that's a general theme. And this lady, I was saying something about taking at least 15 minutes or 10 minutes, and it was some study that I had read. And she said, no, wrong. I attest. And I went, oh, okay, tell me what you mean. And she said, whatever it was, I've been meditating for 10, 15 years. And when I first started, I could not sit still. So people saying, sit down for 15 minutes, you know what? Maybe just, it comes back to start where you're at. Let me meet people where they're at. She started with just sitting still. Every morning, I'm going to sit still 2 minutes. That's my starting point. Yeah. And then when I become a little more at ease with that, then I'm going to sit still for 3 minutes. Then I'm going to sit still for longer. Then I'm going to practice meditation. Does that make sense? So there is no one size fits all. And the other thing is that from a perspective of when we stop expecting a certain outcome, i.e., oh, this is going to be blissful, yeah, is when it comes more naturally, because there's so much resistance that comes up. That's what you're facing. that's why when I say it's like you're on the verge of something, you're feeling the resistance. And if you can gently persist through that, then on the other side will be what it is you're desiring. But you have to let go of that desire, strong desire for something. You're chasing it.
Exactly, causes more anxiety than it solves. the pursuit of peacefulness.
That's it. 100%. I see it all the time. And that's where when I say like a gentle persistence, to be at ease with the uneasiness that's coming up is the key to it. And if you've done it even once where you come to the other side, then you know it's there for you and it becomes easier. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. So, Julie, you mentioned like cultural references, and it is important to recognize that, especially in the kind of the mental health well-being space, I certainly see cultural differences in my audience. And with that's something I want to pick apart with you, actually. So in terms of like American audiences, for example, although it's not just America, there's South Africa and Australia, I think are very similar. They're very kind of open to this, like you said, maybe kind of more inclined to have less of a filter when it comes to stuff, but it's because they're open to everything. So if I mention things like counselling and therapy in those kind of audiences, they kind of say, well, so does everybody else, beardy boy, get on with it, kind of thing. Whereas in the UK, it's very different in terms of generationally, culturally, we've been conditioned to believe that like self-care is selfish. So actually we will feel guilty before we put ourselves before anything or anyone. Having, with your experiences of working at Canada and the US, the UK, and also now Europe as well, what's been your experiences of cultural divides in terms of mental health and well-being?
Interesting question. Because I do, like with my members, I have members that are in Spain, Portugal, Canada, and the UK at this moment. And so it's interesting. I think it's on the agenda now everywhere. I think there's always been, or let me put it this way, is that what I found, like I'm going to say from my perspective of teaching meditation even. So I remember I was working at a bank when I decided to start teaching. And I thought, God, people are going to think I'm totally crackers when I start to tell them what I'm doing. But what I found is that actually when I was comfortable with it, so were other people. And it's the same. So a lot of my students that are professionals that were in corporate and kind of environments, it's that when they're comfortable to say that they're doing meditation, other people are comfortable with it as well. So I'm going to apply that to whether I'm taking different types of therapy, whether I'm practicing meditation, whether it's something that if I think of it as a bit out there, then it's like that energy was within me and people respond to it. So what I find is that people, when they're comfortable to say, like, look, I've had some mental struggles, you know, when they are willing to be vulnerable, but it doesn't mean push yourself to be it. It means when you're comfortable, when you feel comfortable inside with who you genuinely are and you can express that, other people tend to become more comfortable with it too. Does that?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually people that don't still buy into that will actually be less vociferous, I guess, in terms of any objection, because they can see that you're actually delivering something which is in line with your ethics and morals and beliefs.
Yeah. And it won't matter to you as much, whatever their response is. That I think is also the key, because you will go, this is what I am. This is what I'm doing. This is what I'm practicing. And it always surprises me. So in a number of cases, some of my old bosses are clients of mine now. Some of them that not a surprise at all, because we used to talk about this stuff. Other people that I perceived that they would never touch it. That was my perception.
Yeah.
That was the barrier to it, is me, not them. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. So sometimes we could be projecting that kind of fear ourselves, or that kind of talking ourselves into a losing game in that sense. You're assuming the worst case outcome to that.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's sometimes when I share that, because I always, when I've been on a cybersecurity contract for many years now, I share what I am on my CV. It's right there on my LinkedIn.
Nice.
There it is. And so therefore, if that's something that you, oppose strongly, well, it's probably not a good match. But even if I'm there, I have to be who I am.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't deliver authenticity and not be authentic, can you? And you're quite right. And it's kind of like being prepared to lose in a way, isn't it? The more that you put out there of yourself, the more visible you become. Actually, the more comfortable you're going to have to become with that. Some people just won't get it, and that's fine, because you want to make sure you surround yourself with people that absolutely get it and absolutely love it.
Yeah. And also, you're absolutely right. And I think, and it's my work to not make those assumptions. And sometimes I do come across, well, I wouldn't touch that. Okay. Of course, I'm not trying to force anybody to do that.
Yeah.
If you want to have a conversation about it, great. I'm here,
But you mentioned your members. So I'm going down the line of, you've either got a community or a cult. Which one is it?
Gosh, I never even thought of it that way. I've had a membership program for a long time now. Thank goodness I was already on Zoom probably since 2016. So I have a regular group that meet online. And then, I have different workshops and different things, many different things. Actually, a lot of my members are now coming to Spain because I do a lot of personal retreats here in Spain as well.
Oh, wow, that sounds beautiful.
Yeah, it's really awesome because I've kept it. At some stage, I will do group retreats. I still do group workshops and stuff in London and other places. But for now, because there's still some risk of, getting a hotel booked and all sorts of stuff like that. I will do group retreats in the future in Spain, but right now it's people or couples that come over and then they have a space for a week or 2 weeks or 5 days or whatever it is. And then we do personal retreats out in the beaches and in the mountains and all sorts of things. Yeah.
Wow, sounds lovely. But you're quite right, actually. Bums on seats is a tough gig right now, especially kind of post-COVID. That has certainly rocked that environment. And so it's not just the rise of virtual sessions, but also, like I said, that there's travel, there's obviously taking a risk on payments up front. It's a tough one, actually, for group events. I get that completely.
Yeah. Again, I say pros and cons because I just did one in London, and if I'm honest, I think it was 2 days before a few people got COVID, a few things were happening, practitioners at the place. I'm like, oh my goodness, why am I trying to do this? And on the day, it was just so obvious. It's amazing. And I think people are so excited to get together in person that it was amazing.
Yeah,
so I'm definitely doing more.
I think especially for the kind of the energy work of what we do in our respective fields. The quarterly Find Your Voice I do, which is all about kind of speaking coaching is a loose bag.
Yeah.
It's about kind of transformational speaking coaching. So in March, like I said, of a cohort of 42, we had 8 pull out actually pretty much on the day with COVID. But actually, it's the right decision because, like I said, it means that everyone kind of did the right thing for the group. And you do kind of feel that, I hope this is going to go okay. And it was so amazing. And actually to kind of be around the energy of being in person with people again and to really kind of throw yourself into that participation element. And I think certainly virtual's been good enough. It has been there. But actually you'll never beat that kind of riffing with an audience and just throwing yourself in amongst the cohort and stuff and just that group mentality. And it's a beautiful thing actually when it's in flow.
Well, it's interesting you say it because, like, let's say for corporate events or even, like I say, my members, because there's people now going, oh, I have my Canadian friends and I have my, British friends and people all over. So there's so much opportunity and it works really well, but there's stuff that we can't do. So that has to come to face-to-face workshops or, coming over here, that, working with sound and music and different singing bowls and different things, like the vibration of frequency and energetically with the group, that kind of stuff you have to do in person, right? So, or going outside and doing walking meditations as an example. Yeah.
So explain to people what singing bowls are. I've actually been in a workshop with them before, and I found them absolutely hypnotic. Oh, as if we're lining this up. I promise you.
Did you see it?
No, no, I didn't. But my audience know that I'm not that organized to line something up. So, as if by magic, here you go.
Well, you don't get the full effect. That's the thing.
Yeah.
This one I actually bought in Tibet. And yes, absolutely beautiful. So a lot of the work that I do is with the chakras, and there's certain vibration sounds that those frequencies, then you can feel them in the body. So it's helping to harmonize energy within your body. That's how I use them. Yeah.
Awesome. So the work that you do, so in terms of meditation and the sessions that you run, what are the benefits of meditating for people that are thinking, could this be a really good thing for me?
You know, again, sometimes I even read, it's like, oh my God, meditation isn't the silver bullet. Yeah. In that there's other complementary things that I believe in, but of course it's changed my life drastically, other people I see. Right now, what I find is that the biggest things people are coming to me for are burnout, anxiety, isolation. This is kind of the newer one, stress and sleep. Those are the big five. Of course, like as we read about, it helps me focus better. It helps me, for me, it was being more grounded in my energy instead of that scattered energy, managing conflict. There's many, many aspects. And just a tidbit there, because I think the mindfulness movement is amazing, but I think meditation is much broader, and it has the essence of like compassion and those kinds of things that, to me, mindfulness kind of misses on. But it can definitely help with those big things, and that's where I see people suffering with. And I mean, I think my biggest message right now in this moment is that I do see a lot of people really, and I mean suffering, a lot of pain, and almost thinking that drowning in despair. Yeah. And that's where I feel meditation can be extremely helpful. That's where I've used it for even my own personal journey. So to give people, to help people recognize that there's hope, there's actually possibility of something else. And it's, sometimes I think, even if it's a crisis, sometimes it's just a small problem, but whatever that is, the magnitude of that problem is just a sign for us to pay attention. Yeah, absolutely. And there's an opportunity for transformation in that space. If you're willing, I mean, I'm not saying it's going to be a comfortable one, but there is opportunity for transformation. If you are brave enough to be aware of what the root of the suffering is, rather than avoid it, run away from it, which is human nature. That doesn't feel good. Get me out of here, right? But actually, that's why some people, it's difficult. And I know my mom used to say that about me, is like, you should, when I was a kid, you should sit by yourself more, because I was always bored and active. And actually, I think I was afraid to sit with my own self. And if you can do that and accept and let go of the resistance, then actually there's the relief right there.
This show is sponsored by Forging People, Transformational Speaking Coaching. Are you truly being heard in life, in business, in education, even at home? Your ability to deliver any message with clarity, power, and emotion will have an ultimately defining impact on your success as a speaker, leader, and influencer. For more information, contact team@forgingpeople.com. Are you truly being heard? It's time to find your voice.
And is that therefore a kind of a red flag really for people that find it difficult to sit with themselves? I mean, even between kind of, I've had people talking about between ad breaks on TV, they've got to pick up a phone to distract themselves by scrolling, by it's really tough to be by yourself, especially if you're going through periods of negative emotions or kind of big life changes, because we all know the anxieties that change can bring up generally. So is that a red flag if people find it hard to sit with themselves?
I think what I would say is it's a question to ask yourself is, why am I reaching for something all the time? What is that driver, because look a bit deeper. I find sometimes, let's say, people will say to me, they can't wait to have some peace. But even when they're in a peaceful environment, it's like they're searching for stress. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Seems boring. And there's some science behind that. Actually, I was looking at something from Joe Dispenza, who is more kind of quantum physics. And that idea of there is a comfort zone. Yeah. And we've programmed ourselves that this is comfortable, and anything outside of that we resist. So, and this is where meditation, we're in high beta. If you're stressed, especially high beta, and you come into beta brainwaves and then into alpha and theta, that's when you're starting to meditate. And this is the power of meditation, because it's going beyond the intellectual mind, right? So we're trying to think our way out of being stressed, anxious, those types of things, and we just get wound up. So this is actually going into a deeper level of mind, subconscious, and reprogramming it. So giving it a new experience. So we've programmed the body with the mind to respond, becomes anxious. All these things happen. So we become more aware of that. And actually also at that same time, give it a new experience. And that new experience, if it's experienced frequently enough, is a new reprogramming. So that's when a lot of these articles will talk about new neural networks. We're learning something new.
Yeah.
It's reprogramming the mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you know what's interesting? I'm not sure whether it's because of the space that I'm in or the people that I attract or whatever that may be, but there does seem to be an awakening to this side of things. But the question that I have kind of thrown out a few times on the show this season with people like yourself who are kind of professional in this space is, what's your belief around the reasoning why this stuff isn't mainstream? There's obviously a positive impact. It obviously creates a lot of good. This is probably a really big question, I guess, because you go into kind of pharmaceuticals and big kind of world issues here, but why isn't this stuff mainstream? Why isn't it prescribed, for example?
It's a great question. And I would say I'm seeing it more and more becoming more and more mainstream, more prescribed. So I'm getting people that from their psychotherapist or even doctors that have said, okay, actually use meditation. Yeah.
Yeah.
That being said, for whatever reason, we look to, and when I say we look to science, but science is showing as well that this stuff works. Yeah. So, but again, we are trying to think our way out of something. So for me, when I first started being interested in meditation, I searched high and low for the science, because that was me. I needed to know what did I just experience? Wow. Okay, that's weird, right? So where's the science to tell me this is right? And then I hit a point where who cares about the science? Because the reality is I just feel completely different. So that being said, there's now more and more science, and I use that for people at the beginning stage. And like everything, though, some science says no, some science says yes. What I say is, if you're open to experiencing something, then you will know if it's for you. Don't let somebody tell you you have to do it, but ask yourself, is it something? How bad is your pain? And what are you willing to try? What are you willing to give up to get relief from that? And But coming back to that question is, I think it is becoming more that way, but why isn't it even more so is a wonderful question. I'd be interested to hear what you have to say even.
Yeah, do you know what? It's a really interesting one that I think this is kind of where the woo-woo skull comes into it, because there's other things that get thrown into this. And we recently had a hypnotherapist on the show, and actually kind of hypnotherapy is seen as more the scientific end of woo-woo, because so it's really interesting. All these, for me, my take on this personally is that there is no one fix-all for anybody for anything. So if I look at my own kind of journey, my own recovery, actually, it's been a patchwork quilt of different things combined that have worked for me, including some of the things that we've mentioned right now, but not one thing worked for me. So I think personally, maybe that's it. Maybe it's because we are all unique in that sense. There is no one fix-all. So unless it has a direct impact, which of course things like medication do, and just to stress for people watching this, I'm not anti-medication at all. I think everything has its place for sure at certain times. But I also think that it's worth exploring this playbook idea that I talk about quite a lot.
Sorry.
You're welcome.
That is great. You're right. Sorry.
Yeah. So, and that's kind of, and that could even be things, if I'm reading a book, watching a podcast, or whatever that may be, if one line jumps out at me, right, that line goes in my playbook because actually it resonates with me. And I've got like a whole patchwork quilt, as I say, of different kind of video clips, music clips, songs, really important. Music is really tough. Just before we hit record, I was talking about my love of country music, that storytelling element speaks to me. It's not all about losing your doggy and misses, I promise. But those things that really pick me up, and I think certainly that with well-being generally, and I experience this as a man being in the well-being space as well, as a non-solution focused person. The assumption is I'm going to go in talking about waving joss sticks around, and that's, I love a joss stick, but that's not me. It's sometimes gaming is what I need. Sometimes movies are what I need. Sometimes a walking the dog's what I need. But there seems to be an association with, you have to recharge doing certain things which seem massively out of our comfort zone. Actually, like you said, if something gives you energy, fantastic. Put that in your playbook. Simple as that.
Yeah. Well, I like the idea of what resonates. Yeah, that's the thing. And it's interesting you say this because and Eckhart Tolle talks, he's a spiritual teacher, talks about somebody.
He's got a great voice as well, hasn't he?
I love him. He helped me through my own personal crisis. And this thing about, somebody asked him, do you need the crisis to have a transformation? He said, yes, until you don't need the crisis. Right?
Like that.
And me too. Loved it. Because at that moment, and I want to elaborate on some of the things you said, because I went, I'd been a meditation teacher for many years, and I went through a massive personal crisis that was related to physical pain. And that pain then caused me to not be able to sleep, which I used to have insomnia problems when I was younger, which went away when I started meditating. And I was like, how could that be back? But it was related to the pain. And the only solution that I was given from a medical doctor perspective, so the pain management clinic just wanted to have me on loads of drugs. And I was on loads of drugs. And in the back of me, like you were saying, that doesn't align with me, and it worried me, and it became, I couldn't work. I was teaching meditation, but my other work had to stop. I was in such physical pain and worrying about what I was doing to myself. And then the key thing that kicked it into crisis was a breakup. And I'm like, really, at this time? Oh my God. And it was just overwhelming me. And I took an Eckhart Tolle course at that time. And it was all about opening up when you're in crisis. That's why when I say to people that despair or crisis is, say, pay attention and be brave enough because you're going through it anyway. I'm not saying attract a crisis, but when it's there for you, embrace it as much as you can to hold that space where you can go deeper and use, so my tool, meditation, accept. When you can accept where you are, the resistance falls away, and then you have energy to heal. but you're spending so much time in the groveling of being, in my case, I'm in pain, okay, actually move my attention away from that. The energy started to surge, and then I could use that to increase my frequency. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And you hit on a real common theme, I think, for across kind of professionalism in this space, that acceptance is such a crucial part of everything, isn't it? And it's sometimes acceptance of a place which isn't great, and that's difficult, isn't it? I think for me,
yes,
somebody asked me very early on in my kind of speaking career, about 7 years ago, why is lived experience so important when it comes to mental health? Now, for me, the way I described it, as a non-solution focused person, I don't coach, counsel, I don't advise even. The only work that I do in that space is on the speaking coaching. So in the mental health stuff, all I do is share stories, really, and increase engagement in the amazing people like you and the solutions and initiatives are out there. And I think that lived experience was best described this way for me. So I put it was kind of like the vehicle, the best vehicle to drive engagement from the problem to the solution, but it's not the solution. So by sharing lived experience, hopefully it either inspires or empowers or engages people at least to consider reaching out for help themselves, because there's commonality and community there. How important is it to what you do to bring your lived experience into the solution? Because you have both factors going on here.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think as a teacher of meditation, when I first started teaching, my main teacher, Alan Wallace, I remember him talking, and it was somebody else as well. I can't remember. Oh, it was Ravi. Anyway, doesn't matter. The point about the ego coming in. Yeah. So what I feel is if I get a strong sense that this is helpful to somebody, I share, because it's moving through me to, and again, I don't know how to express, actually, I do know how to express this, is that when I teach, I am just a vehicle for information that flows through me. And so what I love about teaching is my growth and their growth is happening at the same time. And if I get a sense that that is the case and I need to share this bit of information, then I do, because it means that person can relate to it even if it's not in that moment. I'm not without any expectation. Oh yeah, breakthrough suddenly. Yeah. Because I've had breakthroughs, transformation, real nuggets that hit me a month later.
Yeah.
But I trust that this information is flowing through to that person for a reason.
And do you feel that approach that you have, as opposed to energy coming from you, it's through you, that you're the conduit, actually, does that help you protect your own energy to then kind of not just stay strong yourself, but to help more people? So you're kind of protecting yourself as you go.
This is where different practitioners, I've had deep conversations about this. So I don't do a lot of practice of saying, I feel my work is to open more, to be strong within. And I work on that aspect of me, but open my heart more. That's my work, because I probably spent, before I started meditating, just, loads of years building up more barriers. And I feel now my work is to let those go more. And that there's something, especially in Tibetan Buddhism, it's called Tonglen, which I believe is a beautiful practice. I've used it many times, people that are suffering, people that are dying. It's profound for practitioners to help you open your heart to be compassionate without hanging on to somebody else's suffering.
And that's huge, because actually there is a risk that people that have had experiences themselves become those wounded healers.
Yes. And I think, instead of closing down more, I consider it opening up more, but not in the way of hanging on to other people's suffering. That's not beneficial to anybody.
No. And in terms of, I mean, we've already mentioned it was a hell of a leap from cybersecurity to meditation. Now, one of my last employed roles was actually in the tech and software space. And I know how difficult, I mean, this is generalism, of course, because there's always exceptions to the rule. But as a generalism, having emotionally led conversations in that space can be difficult at best, probably sometimes. So how did you find that? Obviously, you found that kind of awakening, that transformation yourself. But when you kind of took it back, and currently maybe even still do, take it back into that space, do you find that there's more barriers to acceptance, or because it's coming from one of their own, it's more acceptable maybe?
You know, and again, maybe it seems a bit of a blunt thing to say, but I come back to that is, if I get a sense of I'm trying to prove something, or when I let go of all of that myself and am comfortable with what I am, that's my learning, is to constantly come back to that. If that person is uncomfortable, that's their own uncomfortableness that is coming up, as long as I'm being authentic and not defensive and all of those things. But I try to leave that with them. That's their uncomfortableness, their projection of fear, whatever. I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. But I find if that conversation comes up, or if that's the point of our conversation, then it flows naturally when I treat that person. I'm going to say, it's called a process of transfiguration, where I see that person as who they really are, the essence of that person. When I'm able to do that, the conversation changes. Yeah. And if there's so much barrier there that person is not open to something, then I leave that topic. There's no point. There's no growth for either person. What's the point?
Yeah, absolutely. It makes complete sense. Yeah. And another thing I've seen a lot in this space, and kind of just having one-to-one chats with people, that there seems to be a real kind of commonality when it comes to things like imposter syndrome in this space as well. That because we are spending our days kind of showcasing maybe our best selves and what we should do. And I've been very honest before, it's far easier to kind of showcase the best way to do things rather than actually take your own advice. I know that one for sure. However, it can, the reason why I try to stay honest, if I'm having a rubbish time, I'll tell people I'm having a rubbish time, because actually it helps me with that thing that I should be perfect all the time because I'm talking about this stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you find the same? Is there that kind of thing where you don't feel like you're allowed to have an off day because of that perception that people have of you?
It's so funny you say it, because there's one of my students that is now becoming a meditation teacher. And when I first became a meditation teacher, it's like I can't ever have an argument. I can't ever be angry. I can't ever be this, that, whatever. I'm beyond that now. Or even, people commenting that, well, you should be whatever. And I'm thinking, I'm still a person. Yeah. So, anger comes sometimes, as does, I don't know, sorrow and grief. It overcomes me, the pain, whatever. And it comes back to the less resistance I have. So I was saying to this girl is, remember, you're a human being first. And that give yourself that kindness to be able to experience the full array of your emotions, but know who you are, your intention, your desire, the wrong word there, but your intention of who you want to be is every day, and be that to the best of your ability. That's what I think is, give yourself a break, that's how I deal with it for myself, and check in that my ego, as best as I can, is not coming into play.
Yeah. But that kind of inner voice, that narrative is so, we do have an inclination to talk to ourselves worse than we would people we don't actually like,
Yes.
for example.
Yes.
And I think certainly that one of the real common themes I've kind of heard from people over the past couple of years, for sure, has been this kind of increase of, well, two things really: fear and grief. Not necessarily grief attached to a loss of human life per se, although that has happened, of course, but grief of a loss of a way of life, a loss of freedom, and it kind of shakes your identity to the core a bit. And I think also because of that position of fear, other people's priorities have changed, and and sometimes you're not part of those priorities, and it just seems to be like everything. One of my early mentors, a guy called Brad Burton, said that kind of like it's like a giant snow globe. Everything's been shaken up, and actually we won't know how it looks until the snow's settled. But I think the commonality is there's been a lot of change thrown at us in a very short space of time, and it's knocked a lot of people for six, myself included, at certain points, for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think everybody's been touched by this. And so again, for me, my practice, meditation, and I'm saying energetically, trying to go beyond the mind is so important. Because if I try to think my way out of this, I just start encircling round and round, and I can't think my way out of that. It's a working energetically for me is so key, and working with some of those energies to then, the chakras in particular, to be aware of that, let myself feel that. And then there's like a relief from it just through the awareness stage. And let myself feel the relief from that. And then I have energy to then work on the frequency I want to as much as I can. And I think,
and that's the problem. We have a tendency to take full responsibility for everything that happens to us or even around us, and then work back from that. So it's kind of like we take the damage and then we haven't got enough energy to come back. So it's kind of like you're constantly in that kind of feast or famine mode over the past couple of years of either in a really good place motoring on, or you've been really impacted and you're really struggling to keep up. But very rarely were people in the middle. And it was interesting to see that I do some very kind of light group mentoring stuff, not around the mental health stuff, but kind of checking in on where people are just to get some of what content I need to deliver. And all the numbers were extreme. People were either really, really struggling or really, really okay, not really in the middle anymore. And I found that quite strange, to be honest. But when I relate that to my own personal experiences, I know that one of my big triggers when I'm not in a good place is I become hypersensitive. So I feel the world's happening at me, not around me. So again, we take all of that on board and then wonder why we haven't got the energy to pull ourselves back again. So how do we get that resilience piece, I guess, in place? Because it's not a case of, we don't live in a Disney movie, do we? So it's not a case of we've got to wake up every morning and everything's going to be groovy, little bluebirds flying around. We're going to get knocked off our feet. We're going to get blindsided. Maybe that's the acceptance of that, which gives you some of the momentum.
Yes. And I think resilience sometimes, when I talk to some of my clients, is misconstrued. I'm used to being really, really strong. I'm a super leader and all this success and resilient. Bring me more. I can take it, and actually resilience isn't that. It's this ability to bounce back and be creative and be flexible. That's what you want to get to. And I think you're right, is when the outside, so of course, meditation is about, working internally so that the outside isn't, we're not dependent on the outside for the happiness we're seeking. That when something falls, maybe it's your health, maybe it's your job, your finances, whatever, then it becomes more detrimental because the consistency of what we knew isn't there for us anymore. So it becomes more crisis. So I've felt that too, is that there is no happy medium anymore. Where did it go? But because even if you're working internally and you look out and you go, hold on, right? And that's where I think this idea of, so again, my tool, meditation, coming back to recentering yourself in that space And then you can let go. You can accept things as they are. There's an instant relief to that. So then your energy is back where and then you work on trying to increase the frequency. Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's the key.
This has flown by. It's been such a fascinating chat. Definitely going to have to get you back for a second episode. I think that'd be really cool.
Perfect.
But the question I like to ask everybody that comes on the show is this, the one you've been dreading. I am now the MC of the O2 Arena in London. 20,000 people paid their hard-earned money to come and hear you do your thing. You're kicking back in the green room, just about to announce you to the stage, and your walk-on music kicks in. That song that motivates you, that lifts you, that gets you at peak state. Julie Smith, what would your walk-on track be and why?
Gosh. This is so difficult. This would be simple for most people, but I don't listen to loads of music, and the only thing I can think of is Tina Turner's "Simply the Best." I used to love that
choice.
song.
Yeah, great choice. Like that. Julie Smith, big round of applause.
Thank you so much for having me. Such a pleasure to talk to you, Nick.
Yeah, I love really fascinating conversation. Love that chat. Thank you so much. And so I'm sure everybody else took a lot from that as much as I did as well. So Julie, thank you. I know it won't be the last time we see you on this show for sure, but big thanks to Julie for giving up a busy time to be with us today. And stay tuned. So thanks for tuning in today. Please do hit like and subscribe and all that jazz. I'm not a details guy. I don't actually know what you got to press, but do it anyway. Whatever it takes to kind of keep you going for the next show. So stay tuned and we'll be back to you very shortly. And for now, take care, be well and stay happy. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. Do hit the like button and subscribe to stay tuned for future episodes. Published every Monday and available through YouTube or the podcast platform of your choice. See you next week.